Hello everyone, Not Dead Yet here. Today I will be responding to fellow YouTuber Ryan Taylor, aka BlackThor, who has accused me of harassing another fellow YouTuber that goes by the name of SamDoesFitness. I take these allegations incredibly seriously as they can have a negative effect on my personal and private life outside of YouTube, as well as the number of clients that hire me for personal coaching and the number of members that I will get for my boxing club once that finally opens up. Harassment is not an allegation to throw around lightly, and I am here to make this video in order to defend myself. Okay, so a bit of context here. As I said in my updates video that I posted a while ago, I was set to be in a podcast with 5 other creators, that being SamDoesFitness, BlackThor, Dadlifting, Josh vs Fitness, and Lucas, or Zany, as he's known here on YouTube. And as we were trying to organize this podcast, it was an unorganized shit show. It took us a week to decide topics because we were trying to vote and narrow it down and continuously narrow it down. And when we did finally get the chance to actually film, Sam didn't show up. She completely ditched us without any indication of where she was, what she was doing, or if she would show up. We dedicated 2 hours to filming the podcast, and we only actually filmed for 1. We spent a whole hour waiting for her, and I was trying to get a hold of her, and because I was really the only one who had contact with her. The others tried too, but we were ultimately unable to get a hold of her. She only let us know what she was doing and what happened after the fact, that she decided to go out with her mother as opposed to filming with us. And I said, well, maybe next time you should let us know. It was at that point that I realized that this whole thing was not going to happen unless we had leadership. I realized that we were just poorly organized, and if we were going to make this happen in a timely manner like everybody was hoping, without wasting people's time, because time is valuable, that we needed to be more organized, more strict, and we needed a leader. I begged BlackThor to lead, to start organizing us better. Stop asking us what to do. Tell us, bring us the topics that we wanted or that you think we should talk about, and if any of us have a problem, we can voice that to you. But he needed to start telling, not asking. He basically just kind of brushed off my suggestions and kind of laughed and mocked me or whatever. But I really wanted to get this going. I really wanted to get the podcast done in a timely manner. And so I opened up a group chat called Podcast Only, which was meant so that Thor could post any and all documents he needed to, and we could organize the podcast in a more efficient manner than what we were doing before. Because what we were doing before was simply posting messages in a casual group chat and they would get lost. So that is where the story kind of begins, because Sam eventually says that she can't make it, and I will start reading the DMs and messages now. Honestly, I'm sorry to say, but I probably won't be joining y'all for now. I only have Saturdays off and don't really want to spend it committed to something else. I really just want to take the time to focus on myself right now and see where things go. I appreciate y'all greatly though and wish you the best. I'm sure it's going to be great. I reply, so are you planning to continue posting videos? Because she had previously just made her return to YouTube. Ryan chimes in saying that she'll always have a seat at the table, and she replies, yep, I'm still doing everything, and at that point I remove her from the chat. Dadlifting says, and then there were 5, and then I make an Among Us joke. Ryan chimes in, she did say for now, not sure why the removal was necessary. To be totally blunt, another fitness podcast with just a bunch of dudes is less hype. I respond that she's still in the casual group chat, and when she decides to come back, I'll add her back to this one. As for the podcast being just a bunch of dudes, I think people tend to care more about the personalities and experiences of the people hosting the podcast as opposed to superficial shit like gender. Ryan replies, and there are experiences I know I haven't experienced on account of gender. That's my point, it's actually far from superficial. Gender is one of the biggest uninvited influences on life experience next to racial/ethnic background. Can't ignore the gender aspect of perception. And I reply that people are individuals. Gender aside, there are many experiences that can be shared with a group of solely men or women. That is my point. Also, being a man or a woman does not remove a person's ability to think critically and process information. He says, gender is not unimportant though, mate, and I reply, but it's not as important as you're making it out to be. I agree that it's not unimportant, but it's not a be-all end-all. It's one thing among many that influences perception. He says that it legitimately is though. The male overbearing presence in the community is hella problematic. Lack of female voice leads to a lot of marginalization of female experience, whether intentional or not. I say, well, for starters, there's plenty of women in the community. And he says that's a joke, right? I reply, not at all. There's plenty of women in the fitness industry, people who have interacted with Greg or talked to him, etc. He tells me to check my analytics. And I say, okay, your point? We police what women are interested in then? I am not a collectivist. I am an individualist. People make their own decisions, and that's perfectly fine. And if women want more women in the community, then they can start their own channels, be the change you want to see in the world. Everyone has the power to make a small difference. And he says, but representation matters like a motherfucker. No cap. And I went, then if it matters so much, let women represent themselves. And he says that's why he included Sam. And I reply that that's all well and good, but I think this conversation got a bit derailed. My point is, I don't think our podcast is any more generic without Sam. I'd love to have her, of course, for her experiences as a person, which include her experiences as a woman. But just because we are now just 5 dudes, to me doesn't make what we're planning to do any less interesting or any more generic, because we're all individuals with our own different thoughts and experiences. He says this isn't derailed, it's a central point. You said you wanted leadership. This is it. Diversity of voice is paramount. You can't discuss something like fitness with only a male perspective and expect it to reasonably represent all people. My wife and I are treated differently by the same people in the same gym minutes apart on account of gender. The fitness industry is incredibly toxic because it's almost entirely hetero, cis, white men. Every single step out of that is to the benefit of more people than just those directly represented. Hasty removal for present time in conflict is unreasonable, especially without any sort of discussion or due process. And I say I'd like a fact check on the statement that it's ruled by straight white men. There's plenty of diversity in sport and fitness. I also disagree with that the toxicity in the industry originates from cis straight white men. To which he replies with an angry face emoji. I say diversity of voice is paramount? No, diversity of opinion is paramount. You can have a group of people who are all diverse in sexuality, race, and gender who all think the same. Ever been on a university campus? As for the removal, she couldn't do it for the foreseeable future. This is solely for people to plan the podcast. She is still an Anabolic Friends, and I will happily add her back here when she can/is ready to commit to this. He says, dude, take a look at the proportions. You can't do this analysis on the mere knowledge of a few who don't fit the mold. What fact-checking? The facts are not in your favor. I reply, there are plenty of athletes and influencers who are people of color. However, you did not address the issue of diversity of voice, because to me, diversity of voice equals diversity of opinion. To me, a group of all white men, or all black women, or all Hispanic men, or whatever with varying opinions is way more valuable and better represents diversity of voice than a group that consists of a mix of sexualities, races, and genders that all think the same. And that is the basis of the point I am making in regards to this podcast. Yes, we are now a group of all men, but we all have differing thoughts, ideals, and viewpoints. Evidently. And that is what will make the podcast interesting to watch or listen to. Did I think that it sucked that Sam left? Yes, but I did not think that our podcast was just going to be generic, because we are 5 people with various life experiences. But that was it for the podcast only chat, because what Black Thor did next is he didn't reply to what I said. He closed down Anabolic Friends, the casual group chat. So I confront him about this, asking, why'd you close Anabolic Friends? And he replies that cool-off time was needed. I ask that couldn't be done without closing the chat, and he says there was enough blowing up of everyone's accounts for a bit. He needed to intervene where he could. Alright. A while later, Sam posted her return video to YouTube, in which she references the fact that I was one of the people that inspired her to help get back behind the camera. I left a comment on that video and noticed that she wasn't hearting it, despite the fact that she was hearting other people's comments made well after mine. So it was at that time that I checked her account and realized that I couldn't see it and figured out that I was blocked. So in response to that, I went into podcast only and said, bad news everyone, it appears Sammy has blocked me. This does not bode well for the podcast given everything that has happened. I'll be working out very soon, but I may take a while to reply, but I'll respond wherever I can. Dadlifting replies, oh man, weird, yes, I think it bodes not well. Lucas chimes in that it unfortunately seems as though things have fallen through. And Josh says that she gave me a shout out in her vid. And I said, yeah, but that was filmed before all this went down. If I want to go all tinfoil hat, she also didn't link me when she said she would, and completely ignored my comments, despite hearting comments made well after mine. And again, even if that's all tinfoil hat BS, the point stands that I can't see her page. I haven't tried messaging her about it though, just because I assumed I was blocked. I did send the same message I sent to everyone to her though, and she hasn't replied. And that was it. And that is pretty much where the story left off, until I made my Musket Called Me Racist video, in which I put in this scene, which was a reference to Thor and I's little philosophical disagreement. Not dead yet. Those things aren't superficial at all. Those things are extremely important because they are the lens from which you view the world. You will see things differently, and people will view you differently based off of things like your race, gender, and sexuality. How is that in any way superficial? That is not superficial at all. Thor did not take too kindly to that scene. He messaged me in the DMs saying, "You know, I fully disagree with your views on race, gender, and sexuality and did not take to the mockery well. That is a huge part of what I do, looking into the differences in experience between people of the same and different backgrounds. As you said, diversity of thought is essential. As you recognize, two people from the exact same place will have different experiences, so there is only diversity of thought when having diversity of background. Even with my sibling, we have different experiences as it pertains to race. But neither my nor my sister's spouse's experience individually tell them the impact of the black experience. That is where I feel you are missing in your view. I do acknowledge your age and that you're not in the USA, and will not invalidate your own lived experiences, but would invite you to look into population statistics that use scale rather than raw counts to look at demographic differences. Should you like such sources, I will gladly compile some for you." I replied, "I'm about to go for my run," because it was early in the morning when he messaged me this. "But while I consider what I did a jab at best, I truly believe I did not misrepresent your viewpoint in any way or made it out that you would say anything that you didn't believe. I took the time to break down your argument to its simplest form, and I believe I did a good job. And my point is that there is no real black experience, because that is a relative term. Even in the States, people can have a wildly different experience and wildly different views in similar experiences. Experiences aren't universal, and I factor in the individual rather than losing the individual to group identity." He says, "That's the problem though, Eli. There is no simplest form." I'm going to interject here and say, yes, there is. That is like saying that you cannot break down a 10-page paper into a simpler form. Yes, you can. That is your intro paragraph. And even further than that, that is your thesis statement. What I attempted to do in that scene was break down all of your arguments to its simple thesis statement. Anyone who says that their argument can't be broken down either does not understand their argument well enough to break it down, or is trying to hide something behind the complexity of their argument. That is one of the first things they teach you in critical thinking classes on how to filter information, is how to break down an argument so that you can catch things that they may hide in the complexity. But I continue. "That is the problem though, Eli. There is no simplest form. Discrimination and differential experience are nuanced. This is why representation matters. Of course, there is no universal experience, but there are universally absent experiences. This is why the representation accounting is valid. If you want the most diversity of thought, you need diversity of background. If the same or similar conclusions emerge from those different backgrounds, that is an important recognition." And I said, "With that, you completely missed the point of my video. You can have a group of all the same identity, and so long as their backgrounds are different, they most likely won't come to the same conclusion. Does race, gender, and sexuality play a part in that? Of course. But that's far from a be-all, end-all. It's one factor among many. Also, just because people pertain to a certain group does not mean they lack the ability to process information. They can see what's happening, think critically, and form their own opinions and still have those opinions be valid. Like I said, those things play a role, but not as much of one as people often portray. Plus, I find this ideological push for the idea that only certain groups can have certain experiences is what leads to things like racism, sexism, and bigotry. Because then the narrative shifts from individual experience to group identity, and when you start identifying people based off of group, that's when division and stereotyping happens. Or it also leads to things like the white savior complex that people often complain about. Because people think they know what the black experience is, when in reality, every group can experience discrimination. Sure, some groups may be more of a target in certain areas, but who are you to tell an Irishman that he's never experienced discrimination because he has a lighter skin tone? I also want to make one thing clear. If you want to make a public response, feel free. I'm not someone who can dish it out, but also is unwilling to take it. I stand by what I say. I said that for two reasons. One, I wanted to show that, yeah, I'm willing to kind of poke fun at our little disagreement, but I won't be upset if you poke fun at me in return. And also, I wanted to encourage discussion. I think thoughtful, respectful discussion is one of the most important things that is often neglected in our society. I believe that a 5-minute conversation with someone who disagrees with you, so long as it's respectful and you are both trying to understand each other's views, is far more productive and far more useful than a 2-hour conversation with someone that agrees with you. Because at the end of the day, even if you both disagree, you both either walk away with a better understanding of the other side, as well as a better understanding of your own viewpoints and yourself, because you're forced to delve deeper into what you believe to defend what you believe. But here's what he says in response. Your argument is entirely based on the oversimplification of ethnic studies. The existence of racism towards one group does not detract from racism towards another. The acknowledgement of racism towards heavily marginalized populations is prioritized out of necessity, and you're clearly contradicting yourself. You discuss how people claim to understand the black experience while not being black, but also state that you can rationally and critically think on a situation and understand. The truth is you cannot, and here in the States we tried to establish colorblind ideology. It didn't work. Racism persisted, but well-intentioned people were willfully ignorant to differences in experience on account of color. And at this particular point in time, a public forum is not a physical or mental safe place to present ideas. I have been called N-word repeatedly by people who got into my Zoom classes and have had names set like KKK leader and FU N-word. When my school has done virtual rallies and announced newly elected black class officers, they received N-word and monkey comments. You stand by what you said because of ignorance of the state of racism in this country. Giving a public platform for that is not anything I intended to do. Which again, that goes against what I believe, because I believe, one, that I don't think that I'm really that ignorant or that my views are really that radical, but I believe that an open discussion of ideas is how you find the truth. I reply, okay, I'll address your points one by one going down the list, contradicting myself. No, I'm not. I do believe that people, no matter their background, can have an opinion on a situation. But when you start pushing a narrative like black people and women are oppressed and white men aren't, you get people who will simply parrot that ideology without thinking critically about it. That causes division based off of those aspects because one is seen as the oppressor and the other as the oppressed. There is a scene in a movie where an Irishman tells a Middle Eastern woman that he knows what it feels like when she gets called a pocky, and the whole comment section of that clip was talking about how he has no idea because he's white. Anyone who knows Irish history knows that he understands the war between the Protestants and the Catholics. As for your experiences, yeah, that's terrible that that happened, and those people are obviously not nice people, but those people will always exist. It's the same with being white in Japan, for example. Are those things right? Of course not. And should people speak of them? Yes. But again, not every black person necessarily has or necessarily will experience what you have. You say I'm ignorant to the state of racism in the States, but I believe it is you who is ignorant to the state of racism here in Canada. It's very similar to what happens in the States, except it's more directed against the native population. I'm not arguing that people with similar attributes don't share similar experiences. They very well may. But I also keep in mind that they very well may not. As for forums, and I assume that he meant, like online forums because he talked about Zoom classes. Maybe he's talking about physical forums, but I still do believe that my point stands in terms of even physical, like literal in-class forums. As for forums, they've never been a safe place and most likely never will be. For anyone. Does that suck? Yes. But that's how the world is. It isn't safe. And I'm saying this out of pragmatism, not like a get over it, it's not safe kind of way. I'm being realistic here. We will never achieve a perfect world, at least not without the loss of essential freedom. And at that point, is it really perfect? I don't mean to say we shouldn't strive to be better, of course we should, but it's more focused on what we can realistically do as opposed to living in a fantasy. Not saying that he is, just applying that thought in general. I also do not entirely appreciate the air of condescension that came off in your last message. You claim you do not want to give a platform to ignorance, and yet it seems to me that nothing I say will change your mind. You've already decided that I am ignorant based off of the things you say. You see me as a young and ignorant child, as opposed to an individual that has reasons for believing what he believes. It seems to me that you aren't really reflecting on what I am saying. I am open to being wrong, and I find this conversation incredibly enlightening and valuable because even if we disagree, I not only understand your side of the argument better, but I was also forced to delve deeper into what I believe and thus know more about myself as a result. Writing me off as ignorant is easy because it doesn't force you to reflect on the things that I am saying and truly see if they have any merit. You've already written me off. That to me seems more like true ignorance. You are free to correct me if I am wrong. Perhaps I misinterpreted the text. Tone is hard to distinguish over texting after all. Because here's the thing. I'm not even saying you're wrong. I'm just saying you're not right either. Those things do affect your worldview. However, so many other things do, and they aren't as important as they're often made out to be. In response to that, he just simply says, "Fam, you wore a MAGA hat and a Donald Trump shirt. You were discussing American politics." That's what you took out of all that entire speech? I wore a MAGA hat and a Trump shirt. Yes. When did I discuss American politics? When I said I'd run for president? As I was dressed in a Canada shirt? With a Canada hat? To emphasize the fact that I'm Canadian? I am well enough educated to know that you couldn't run for US president on account of being Canadian. That's not the point. I am responding to your comments about not understanding racism in Canada. The MAGA hat is a symbol. I reply, the reason I bring up racism in Canada is because you said I don't understand racism in the States. It's not that different up here, despite what people may tell you. You have also not addressed anything I have said thus far, in response, I mean. And he says, and it was recently used as a symbol for an attempted coup at our capital. It has consistently been a symbol of racism and sexism. In the attempted coup, wearers of that hat made their fascist ideology clear when they removed the hanging American flag and replaced it with a Trump flag. It is not so lighthearted a symbol to use when presenting a stance that racism isn't the problem it's made out to be. And yes, not all black people experience direct racism, but we are all influenced by racist policy. Again, still didn't really address most of the main points I made. I reply, yeah, I don't agree with that coup at all. I was wearing it while calling myself a racist. I didn't say racism isn't a problem. Don't twist my words. I said that I view individuals as more than race, and that those things are more superficial than people make them out to be. That's not the same thing as saying racism isn't a problem. He says, and by not giving a platform for hate, it went from ignorance to hate now. But he says, and by not giving a platform for hate, I mean I will not fuel the fire. This does not demand a public video. I also don't have the time to put it together. This is why my responses have been cut off and short. It's my workday and this is not my main priority. Race is fundamentally not superficial. That's where you're mistaken, mate. The history and the way in which people's lives are shaped on account of heritage makes it essential. I reply, and while this isn't a real argument, I would also like to point out that you have used BLM imagery abundantly on your channel, an organization that has encouraged political violence, riots, and also attempted to break into the government buildings when Kavanaugh was put into position. And that is where you and I disagree, because while sure, you can't choose where you start in life, you can still choose where you end up. He says, I am a black man. Black lives matter. And in response to me saying you can choose where you end up in life, he simply says you can't. I reply, I'm not saying they don't. I'm saying I don't support BLM, the organization. They do not have a monopoly on racial equality. And I said, and that's where you and I disagree. In reference to you can't choose where you start out in life. Or where you end up in life, rather. He says, dude, I've seen countless young people whose life circumstances beyond their control derailed them from striving towards their goals. I said, you choose to focus on powerlessness, whereas I choose to focus on what I can control. And in response to him saying he's seen many young people get derailed by factors out of their control, I say, so have I. I was one of them. But at the end of the day, you always have a choice. Things will change you, but it's you who chooses for better or for worse. I refuse to submit to powerlessness, because there is always something you can do, no matter how small or insignificant, to work towards tomorrow. That is the point of my sign-off. I think it's a good representation where you and I differ in worldview, though. He replies, oh, and that's the thing. You think my view is powerlessness. It's not. It's a fight for power. I know the passion you have for boxing and how far that carries you. Register that others have passions they'll fight for too. And there's a lot to be said on that. I said the problem with that type of thinking leads to powerlessness. When you blame your situation on powers that be, rather than focusing on what you can change on a personal level, you resign yourself to powerlessness. You admit you believe that you cannot choose where you end up in life. How is that not a resignation to powerlessness? And while yes, what I say does not apply 100% of the time, no ideology is perfect, I recognize that. Interjecting here, yeah, sometimes you just get completely screwed over by factors out of your control. I recognize that, but this is my viewpoint in general. No ideology is correct 100% of the time. There will always be exceptions. And I wanted to recognize that there. I continue. At the end of the day, though, I doubt I'll be able to convince you of my side, nor you me. However, I can't say that I am objectively right, and that you are objectively wrong. And neither can you. The conversation has switched to one of perspective, and perspective is something that is very difficult to disprove. I am still, however, interested in your perspective. And he replies, bullshit. The finish line is different. Powerlessness would be permitting the status quo. I am not idly sitting by while you express harmful views. My views are not harmful. He says expressions such as yours legitimately are the sort of justification for maintenance of the status quo. He says they are. Eli, there's a lot you don't get. If you want to genuinely be open to understanding, you have to be willing to listen to people from the group you're discussing. You have no claim to blackness. You have no claim to womanhood. You cannot proclaim that your understanding goes beyond the lived experiences of millions of people. I do not think you're foolish enough to believe that. I think your ego tells you to fight. I reply, okay, this is a little bit off topic, but I'm curious. And I put this image up, and I said, I believe this quote summarizes my views. Do you believe this is harmful? That this scene in that movie is an expression of harmful views. He says, those are not the views you express. And I said, yes, they are. And he said, it may be what you think you're saying, but in the context of race and gender, it doesn't translate. And then he says, let's be clear. You have medical examinations before your sport. I do not. Every powerlifting meet I did with an abdominal hernia. My last I did with a torn quadricep as well. I know what it means to fight through and say to hell with pain and struggle. You want to make sport analogies, that's great, but make sure you know who you're talking to. I could barely walk, but I put 562 pounds on my back twice, pushed through the second attempt as I felt my tear opening up more. Had to get walked off the platform. That's the not give up mentality I come with. You think you understand heart, and maybe you do, but don't assume others don't. What this is in reference to is something that I said when we first filmed our initial podcast about a month ago, where one of our questions was, who is the strongest among us? And everyone kind of unanimously said, well, Thor, obviously. And I said, hold up. You can lift more than me. Doesn't mean you're stronger than me. Strength to me means a lot more than how much you can pick up off the floor. And that is what he is referencing. I replied, you're right. I do have an ego. A massive one. Especially when it comes to boxing. When it comes to that, I am an untouchable god. Is that always a bad thing? No. Is that always a good thing? Also no. Is what you did respectable? Of course, and I do respect it. You have lifted more than I most likely ever will in my entire life. But in regards to what you said about race and gender, there's the rub. You claim I cannot proclaim that my understanding goes beyond those of the groups I talk about. But the thing is, this is far from the first time I've had this conversation. I've had men and women of different ages and races both say exactly what you've said to me today, and also the exact opposite. Of course, I'm more biased to the ones I agree with, as are you. But I've listened to too many black people, many women, many Asians and Hispanics, and everyone's answer was different. Some agreed with you completely. Some agreed with me completely. Some were somewhere in between. Out of curiosity, what do you think of Musquet's original video? In reference to Musquet's Greg Doucette is a Racist True Stories video. Do you believe it to be harmful as well? Because it struck me as having a very similar message to mine. He replies, there will always be people of whatever background of differing opinions. It doesn't invalidate the other messaging. There are plenty of people who are uneducated and can be easily swayed. As per Musquet's video, his piece was satirical comedy and was done by a black man. I'd like to interject here. His piece was satirical comedy. And you think mine wasn't? You think this image here is the epitome of white supremacy? An Irish, Ukrainian, and Filipino mix dabbing to a messed up swastika and autistic Hortler? It is literally a mockery of everything white supremacy stands for. 1, I am not Aryan. 2, even if I was, I am a mix. I am a mutt. I am not pure. 2, I've defaced their leader as well as their symbol. And their salute. If I did anything remotely close to that in 1945 Germany, I would be shot dead for treason against the Fuhrer. You think mine wasn't satirical comedy? You think that was serious? You think a white supremacist is looking at this image here and going, oh yeah, that's what we believe. He supports us and he is one of us. I continue. His piece was satirical comedy and was performed by a black man. That alone makes it different. Yes, that means there are messages that are best made by certain groups because it pertains to them. And Musket has lived life within his experiences. He may yet see more. One of my defining life experiences happened when I was about your age. Prior to that, I felt it was really overblown. Perspective changed in an instant, and not from how I interpreted the experience, but that which my friends saw it. I didn't realize I was victim to targeted police harassment until after the fact. Had I been alone, I would have never known. To answer bluntly, yes, I think it's harmful, but not for reasons I'd wager you'd suspect. It's harmful because non-black people will use it as justification in arguing things aren't so bad. Now, I was baffled by this response. This happened late at night, or later at least, and I didn't know how to reply because he basically just called Musket and Uncle Tom. He was like, oh, Musket's experiences? Yeah, he's just uneducated, easily swayed, and when he gets older, he'll agree with me. Yeah, maybe he will, but do you ever think about the fact that maybe he won't? And that his opinion still has merit and value, and it's still valid, despite the fact that he disagreed with you? And at this point, through all the attacks against my character, the arguing of points that I didn't make, the strawmanning of my arguments, and the shifting of the goalpost, I was just kind of done. I decided to sleep on it, go to bed, and answer another time. I ended up getting caught up with my own personal affairs, and I didn't actually end up replying until 3 days later. I decided that 3 days later, when I had the time, that I would just reply to everything at once, say my piece, and hopefully walk away. Here is what I said. Oh, and just a brief interjection here before someone tries to say, oh, well, you don't know what it's like to be a victim of targeted police harassment. You're talking to someone who has almost been shot dead by police. The policeman literally admitted that he would have shot me dead. So, I might have an idea of what I'm talking about. Okay, so I finally have time to reply to this, and you just showed me there's no point in continuing this conversation. Throughout this conversation, you have done nothing but shift the goal, ignore key points I make, strawman my arguments, attack my character, and project your own insecurities onto me. You claim that I don't truly believe what I say, and that I am simply doing this to be contrarian. However, I have actually countered everything you have said about my worldview with points of my own. The reason I am able to do that is because my worldview is well thought out. I think about how I view the world and actively challenge my own worldview so that I am able to defend it should I need to. It seems to me, based on how you've carried yourself throughout this conversation, that you do not do that. I suspect you surround yourself with people that either completely agree with you or are unable to go against you for one reason or another, and thus cannot fathom the idea that someone may disagree with you or that you may be wrong. Because here's the thing. You claim I'm simply saying these things to fight, and yet I'm not the one really fighting here. You are. I, in this very conversation, have both admitted to the fact that I very well may be wrong, as well as the fact that I do not actually completely disagree. We just don't completely agree either. And yet you paint it out like we disagree completely, despite the sheer number of times I've said you're right or I agree. It's just that I normally add to an extent after that, and it seems like those three words completely negate the ones that came before them in your mind. Now let's talk about projections of your own insecurities, because my previous point leads into this. Along with claiming that I simply hold these views because my ego tells me to fight, you claim that my views are contradictory. I do not believe that they are, and have explained why. But let's have a look at your contradictions now, shall we? Because there are times that you contradict yourself so hard that you actually end up arguing for me rather than against me. A few examples. Your view on choosing where you end up in life. Quote, "It's not about powerlessness, it's about fighting for power," unquote. Oh, you mean something like an individual doing whatever he can to change his situation? No matter how big or how small? Doing something like organizing a group that fights against injustice in the world? Because that sounds an awful lot like the viewpoint of a certain boxer who isn't dead yet. Or the hypocrisy of calling the MAGA hat a symbol of fascism and anti-patriotism, despite using BLM imagery abundantly on your channel. BLM has actively encouraged political riots and political violence, and you claim tearing down an American flag and replacing it with a Trump flag is anti-patriotic, which it is. But do you know how many times I've seen organizations like BLM and Antifa burn the American flag? What happened to "riots are the voice of the unheard," something that was repeated ad nauseum during the BLM riots? Is rioting no longer the voice of the unheard because of the race of the rioters? I do not like riots. Period. And I discourage them, no matter who, because I do my best to be consistent with what I believe. It's riots are bad. Not riots are bad unless they're done in the name of a political philosophy I endorse. "You're ignorant of the state of racism in the USA," quote unquote. You say that like it invalidates my opinion or like it's an argument. It's not. I remember you saying that you stand with Hong Kong, as do I. But by your logic, your opinion shouldn't count for much because you do not live in Hong Kong and are ignorant to how bad it truly is there. You brought up my ego, and while yes, it is massive, it is not so fragile that it cannot allow for others to also have an ego. You got so butthurt that I said you may not be stronger than me that you had to bring it up a month later in a completely unrelated discussion in an attempt to attack my character by saying I was controlled by my massive ego. "I think your ego tells you to fight," quote unquote. Why don't you look in your own kitchen before you say someone else's is messy, or rather, unanabolic? And finally, your most recent and most ludicrous point that is pretty much a summary of everything I just said. Quote, "There will always be people of whatever background of differing opinions. It doesn't invalidate the other messaging. There are plenty of people who are uneducated and can be easily swayed." That is the exact point I am trying to get across to you. Neither one of us is objectively right, and there are so many differing worldviews that labeling people based off of group identity is doing a disservice to the individuals within said group. Your point in that argument essentially boils down to, listen to black people. I do. Not those black people. That's not how it works. It's not, listen only to the black voices I agree with. The world is more complicated than that. You also seem to be forgetting one key factor in all of this too. I ain't white. I am what people would classify as a person of color, but that doesn't seem to come up much despite the fact that you're a black man has been brought up multiple times. And if I may interject, shouldn't my voice be one of the voices that you're elevating considering I'm Asian and the rising rates of Asian discrimination and racism due to COVID-19? Shouldn't me as an Asian be one of the people that you're trying to elevate? By your own logic? I continue. I, too, am a POC with my own lived experiences, and while you started off saying you would not deny them at the beginning of this conversation, your actions throughout say otherwise. Actions speak louder than words, and it's clear to me that you were simply paying lip service to not denying my lived experiences rather than actually trying to understand them. This is all made evident in your final argument, where you essentially say that the lived experiences of POC that do not agree with you are invalid because they are uneducated and easily swayed. Did it ever occur to you that it may be you who is uneducated and easily swayed? Most likely not, because it has become rather evident that you have put yourself in an echo chamber and have not stepped foot out of it in a long time, made clear by you labeling my rather moderate views. Remember, I said that I actually agree with you to a certain extent, as harmful. It is clear you either lack or simply choose not to use the most basic of critical thinking skills. I guess it's a good thing you teach math. And while yes, that is a bit of a mic drop moment, it's made to emphasize a point. Math is objective. 2 plus 2 equals 4. If you write 2 plus 2 equals 3, you cannot argue that 2 plus 2 equals 3 and be right. In the real world, in philosophy, in critical thinking, if you can make a good argument for it, you can still get full points, even if people disagree with you. That is one of the first things they teach you, is that the truth in history is not anywhere on the two extremes. It is most likely somewhere in the middle. Both extremes are most likely right to an extent, and it is up to the individual to decide to what extent each side is right. So yeah, sure, it's a bit of a burn, but it's also made to emphasize it's a good thing that you teach something that is made to be objectively, I can tell you you're wrong, as opposed to something like history, critical thinking, philosophy, where it's a lot of, you may be right, you may have a point, argue your point. But that isn't where this story ends either. Let's keep going. So I learned from another fellow creator, whom I will not name for the sake of anonymity, that Thor had actually opened up another group chat after closing the initial anabolic friends, and I consider that incredibly cowardly. Running away from a civil discussion of ideas because you couldn't defend your viewpoint, closing down the main group chat that we all used to talk to make yourself feel big and powerful and in control again, and then opening up another group chat without certain people in it so that you can have more control, in my opinion, is pretty cowardly. Now, I understand him leaving myself out because I'm willing to stand up to him, and he didn't like that, but he also left out Lucas, or Zany as he's known here on YouTube, and that didn't make any sense to me because Zany was supposed to be his friend, and he was a core member of the original 6 that was supposed to do this podcast. Zany felt disappointed, and he felt like him and Thor weren't really friends anymore because Anabolic Friends closed down and he wasn't included in this new project. So I decided to call him out on it on his video, doing a collab with Dad Lifting. Here is what I said, and here is what Thor said in response. "You are such a coward." He says, "Pardon?" And I said, "You're a coward. I understand you leaving me out, but you could have included Zany." He says, "Mate, you can count, right? This is a conversation between only 2 people. I don't see anyone else complaining about being left out. We made a decision based on what we as individual creators felt was good, appropriate, and achievable. We chose a topic about which we both passionately care. I understand you like to call things as you see them, but at least consider look at and consider the obvious here." And I would like to throw that back at you. Look at and consider the obvious here. I think it's pretty clear that I wasn't talking about your collab with Dad Lifting. There was something more behind the scenes. But, benefit of the doubt, maybe he misinterpreted what I said, so I decided to be more upfront about it. I was talking about the secret group chat that you made and left Lucas and I out of. I understand myself, but you could have included Lucas. He was also a part of Anabolic Friends. He says, "If Lucas wants to collab, he's welcome to reach out to me. That's never been an issue for him. Your complaint is empty." Not my complaint, Lucas's complaint. And way to push all the blame on Lucas. That argument is essentially, why didn't you include me in this new project? Why didn't you ask? He was a key member, one of the 6 original hosts, and you left him out. I said, "Lucas was a member of Anabolic Friends, a group chat which you closed for no reason. He should have been one of the first added to this new one. We'll just wait until Lucas inevitably sees this comment thread. Then you can tell him to his face that his complaint was empty." Now, Thor's next comment is why I decided to make this video. I'll read it once, and then I'm going to go through it again, pointing out all the lies and misrepresentations of the truth that he says in this comment. Thor says, "It was not closed for no reason. It was closed because you were making unilateral decisions to remove people irrespective of their unique perspective." In parentheses, he says, "To anyone reading this, he removed the creator who was at the time the sole female in the group under the insistence that women are well enough represented in the online fitness community and that he could think rationally to speak on behalf of women. Your actions and harassment of that person led them to blocking you, which you then felt a need to comment on and complain about in the main group. That's why the group closed. I will not tolerate a space I created for a project I wanted to launch being misused for such a purpose. Nobody I chose to invite has any right to entitlement to all future projects. I wanted to discuss this topic with Heinz because he has kids and I work with people close in age to his kids. We both have vested interest in the subject. Your complaint on Lucas's behalf is unwarranted. have never told Lucas I will not work with him. I understand you want to create drama, but this is doing so to try and generate beef with no substance. This is not unlike when you specifically told me I could make a response video to you mocking me, which you went so far as to buy a costume to do. You have seen that drama grows channels, and so you wanted to fuel your growth. I'm going to allow this to increase my viewer engagement and comment count, but you are putting on display exactly the sort of attitude that led to this being the smaller scale project that it is. I reply that most of that is a complete and utter lie, and while I wasn't going to make a video on this, now I just might have to. You've levied some pretty serious accusations against me. Anyone that was in that chat can vouch for me that what you just described is far from what actually happened. He replies, the points I made in my response are the same ones used in your costumes attack on my character. You've put it in the public domain already, man, but go for it. So, let us return to the statements and the many lies that he says about me. It was not closed for no reason. It was closed because you were making unilateral decisions to remove people irrespective of their unique perspective. Most of the people in that group chat were fine with me removing Sammy. You were mainly the one who had the problem. In parentheses, to anyone reading this, he removed the creator who is the sole female in our group under the insistence that women are well enough represented in the online fitness community and that he could think rationally to speak on behalf of women. I never said that. That is not what I said at all. I said there are plenty of women and people of color in the fitness industry. Is there enough representation? No. Because what is enough representation? I don't think there's ever enough representation because that's putting a number on it. I'm not going to be like, 50 people. That's enough. That's not my view. I said there is plenty of representation, which you cannot deny. Hell, off the top of my head, for my sport alone, the 4 kings of boxing are 3 black men and a Hispanic man. Sugar Ray Leonard, Marvelous Marvin Hagler, Thomas the Hitman Hearns, Roberto Duran, the Hands of Stone, Mike Tyson, Muhammad Ali, Sugar Ray Robinson, Evander Holyfield, George Foreman, Joe Frazier. How many white boxers can you name? Tyson Fury. Yes, Tyson Fury. Lomachenko. Dempsey. Rocky Marciano. Maybe Willie Pep and Jess Willard if you're really into boxing. There's a lot of representation in the fitness industry. Is there enough? No, because there will never be enough because there's never a number that's like, that's good. But I said there is plenty of representation in the fitness industry. As for claiming that I could speak on behalf of women by thinking rationally, that is not what I said at all. I never claimed to speak for anyone other than myself. My claim was that you can think rationally on any situation and have an opinion on it, and have that opinion still be valid. That was my point. I never said I was speaking on behalf of women. I said I was speaking on behalf of myself with my opinions, and that my opinion is still valid, despite the fact that I am a man. I'm not saying I'm speaking for or on behalf of anybody. The person I'm speaking on behalf of is myself. And if you disagree with me, if anyone disagrees with me, that's fine. But I'm speaking on behalf of myself. Let's continue. Your actions and harassment of that person led them to blocking you. Right. And this is the rub, right? You want to see my harassment? You want to see it? Here it is. Right there. Those 2 screenshots. My harassment. Have a look. There it is. That was those were what led them to blocking me. Those were the screenshots and all the harassment that I did. Oh, and by the way, I sent those last 2 messages to everyone in that group chat that I wasn't sure whether or not we were cool after that ideological discussion that happened in podcast only. So, make up your mind about my harassment of Sam. Which you then felt the need to comment on and complain about in the main group. That's why the group closed. Wrong again, Buster Brown. I've already shown you what I said, but that complaint wasn't in the main group that closed. That complaint was in podcast only, the group I started. He makes it seem like I went on some massive incel rant. Oh, I can't believe that SamDoesFitness blocked me. She's such a bitch, and why the fuck would she do that? I hate her. No. I said, listen, guys, it appears Sam blocked me. It doesn't look like we'll be doing this podcast because one of the 6 main hosts has blocked me. So even when she says, I'm ready to come back onto this podcast, we probably won't have her as a host anymore. But why? Why did he make it seem like I commented in the main chat? And that was the reason it closed. Probably because it makes things look better. Remember what he said as the reason the podcast closed? There was enough blowing up of people's accounts. I didn't blow up people's accounts in that chat. It was mostly Sam and Thor. And yet you lie to make me seem like an asshole and a piece of crap that's going around complaining about Sam to the point where the chat has to close. That's not what happened at all. It was a passing thing informing people that I had been blocked. Not this big rant and string of complaints that forced you to close the chat. You closed the chat immediately after, or almost immediately after our philosophical discussion. Because you got butthurt that someone stood up to you and that you couldn't actually defend your opinion. And that the control was taken away from you. So you needed to feel in control again. So you closed the chat to give yourself an erection. This is all obviously my opinion. So maybe there's other things that Thor hasn't said. But this is what I believe. I believe that he wanted to feel in control and feel like the big, strong man in charge again. And so he did what he could, as he said, intervened, and closed the chat. Let us keep going. Nobody I chose to invite had any right to entitlement to all future projects. What he is doing here is what I call hiding behind technicalities to make yourself right. Because, well, sure, you are technically right. That doesn't take away the fact that what you did greatly disappointed Lucas. There's a difference between doing nothing wrong and doing the right thing. Sure, technically, you didn't do anything wrong. Technically, you're right. But you didn't do the right thing. There's something called common courtesy. And I believe that common courtesy here would have been to at least let Lucas into this chat. But that is up for you guys to decide. I understand you want to create drama, but this is doing so to try to generate beef with no substance. This is unlike when you specifically told me I could make a response video to you mocking me, which you went so far as to buy a costume to do. We'll go through the list here. Does it look like I'm trying to generate drama to grow my channel? Does this look like I'm having fun? Do you think I like this? I'm fine with calling people out. I have that billboard or bulletin board behind me, but that's all in good fun. You think when I said I'm gonna fight Jesse James West that I have any real beef against him? No. This could actually harm me. This could damage my reputation and affect my future career prospects as a result. You think this is fun? You think I like doing this? I've read to you the chat. Did it seem like I was trying to egg him on to get him to make a response video so that I could capitalize on the drama to grow my channel? You think that's what... Does it seem like that's what happened? I leave that decision up to you. But... again, make a video response to you mocking me. I've already given the reasons why I said that. I wanted to show that I'm willing to dish it out, but I'm also willing to take it. And I also wanted to encourage thoughtful discussion because I figured discussions like this would be what people would tune into the podcast for. And maybe we can enlighten some of the people in the community and promote critical thought, which is something I think is sorely lacking in our society. But again, I leave that decision up to you. You can, and I'm talking to my audience here, you guys. You guys decide what you think of what I said and did. And finally, did I buy the costume? No, I didn't. I am a cosplayer. I own a lot of costumes. You want proof? Here's a picture of me and my friends dressed as the Avengers on Avengers Endgame. That is what I bought the costume for. And yes, while my friend dressed as Thor isn't wearing the shirt that I wore because the shirt actually arrived the day after we went to the movies, 3 to 5 business days, my ass, if you look closely, you can see that he's wearing the helmet and he's holding the hammer that I am wearing and holding in that small clip. So no, I did not buy this costume specifically to mock you. I had it, and I was going to add that section where I talk about the difference in viewpoints anyway, and then I was going through my closet, saw the shirt, and thought, hey, this would be a pretty kind of funny inside jab, because a total of 6 people would have understood it. I am one of them, and another one probably doesn't watch my channel anymore because she has me blocked on Instagram. Most of my audience probably thought it was just a funny costume change because I had many in that video. And finally, the points I make in my response are the same ones you used in your costumed attack on my character. I'd like to start out by, if anybody wants to go back and rewatch those clips, the clip of me dressed as Thor talking about worldview, where I claim that he harassed somebody, or claim anything remotely close in severity to that, please let me know. If you can find the clip or the spot where I say anything remotely close to Thor harassed somebody, please show it to me, because I sure as hell cannot find it. And there's one other point I want to make here. It was not an attack on your character. It was an attack on your arguments, on your opinions. There's a difference. There's a big difference between me attacking your character and attacking your arguments. And the fact that you seem to conflate the two is very telling of your mentality towards this. However, we still aren't done yet. Because after this was posted, I went up on Instagram and posted a couple videos on my story saying that another creator had levied some pretty serious accusations against me and that I was going to reply to them in a serious video. Thor, after seeing my story, DM'd me in what I can only assume was an attempt to intimidate me into not posting this video. I will read to you what he said and what I said. I will give you my interpretation of events, and I will let you all decide for yourselves whether or not I'm right or whether or not I'm wrong. Let's get into it. I will be curious to see what you say and how you frame things, in particular how you see any of what I said is a lie. Also, just so you know, I just found out that YouTube didn't even display your comments and that thread publicly because it perceived it as harassment. I reply, I'm curious how you see any of what you said as the truth. I suppose you'll see what I have to say when I make the video. He says, I said no lies. I wonder how you'll deny your behavior. By telling the truth. So you didn't bother Sam to the point that she blocked you? And I said, you want to see my harassment? Here it is. And I posted up that screenshot. Right there. Same one as I showed you guys just a moment ago. You want to see my harassment? That's my harassment. He continues, so you didn't remove her from the group because she wouldn't be ready at the time, even though others in the group weren't ready and able either? I reply that she wasn't able to commit to the project. No point in keeping her in a group that she wasn't able to commit to. So did Armin, man. And Armin is another member of this group who was not a core host. He was someone who knew the ins and outs of podcasts and was giving us advice. But anyway, Thor continues, so did Armin, man. He said he didn't know when he'd be able to, just as Sam did, and I reply that he wasn't a host. Then why was he in the group still if it was only for the cast? You have just no consistency. You notice the nitpicking here? How he's just trying to nitpick every little thing to make it so that I'm super wrong and have no consistency. I replied because he was going to help with editing, which I figured was his main role, as by what you said. And he says, really? You think someone who is too busy to show up for recording is going to be able to contribute time to editing? Eli, man, that just doesn't make sense. And my response to that is yes. I don't know Armin's schedule. Maybe he just wasn't free when the rest of us were. Maybe he's only free at like 9 a.m. in the morning and none of us are free that time. Maybe he can contribute only half an hour, but that half an hour he can contribute to editing instead of an hour or 2 hour long recording session. I don't know. Yeah, I see that as perfectly plausible. He continues by saying he'd be coming on when he'd be able to and would give input and direction then. My reply to that is then shouldn't he know at least what's going on, which is why I left him in the group. And to be honest, I kind of forgot he was in the group because he barely even talked. Sam didn't need to know what was going on. She leaves, she's in the casual chat, and then when she says, I can become a host again, we add her back. But if he's going to give us direction and advice, shouldn't he have an idea of what we're doing? And then Thor says, and I don't mean to throw him under the bus either. I respect the hell out of him and know he's putting in a ton of work outside of this tiny project. And I agree with him on that. I am not throwing Armin under the bus here. I have nothing bad to say against the man. He has been nothing but polite and courteous to me. And I have a ton of respect for him. Thor continues, also, if you message someone several times and they don't respond and eventually block you, consider what you're doing may be harassment. 3 messages. 3 messages is harassment, everyone. Make a note. Oh, well, you message, if you look at the other screenshot, you messaged her a few more times. Yeah, that was actually during the first time we recorded, because I was trying to get a hold of her to see where the hell she was and if she was even going to show up to that recording session. So 3 messages. Technically 4, but I'm going to count 3 because I sent those 2 messages at the exact same time. 3 messages is harassment. Make a note of that, everyone. So 2 is the max, and on 2, you're on thin freaking ice. So I'd say just 1, but just to be very, very safe, don't ever message anybody. Because then if you just don't message anyone, they can't accuse you of harassment, right? I dropped my phone. 3 messages is harassment, apparently. I'll let you guys decide whether or not that's true. I reply, we were planning a collab. Or so I thought. But hey, I'm going to be as objective as I can with this video, and I believe that I have. So if I'm wrong, you can just sit back and watch this all blow up in my face. He continues by saying, and you were being so pushy that events transpired as they did. Right, because this is all my fault. Every single thing that happened here was my fault. Me. And probably because I was the leader of the group, right? Because he didn't want to lead. He didn't want to try and organize things in an efficient manner. So I took it upon myself. And then because of that, everything is my fault. Listen, I'm not claiming that everything I did here was perfect or that I'm 100% in the right. Did I do some things that... Could I have handled the situation better? Yeah. But at the end of the day, I started to lose patience and respect for this man because it was clear that he didn't have any of those 2 things with me. 0 patience, a 0, and a 0 respect for me. So why would I have respect for someone that has a 0 respect for me? So yeah, sure. Do I have a role to play in how the events transpired? Yeah, 100%. Am I 100% in the right? Did I do things wrong? Yeah. But so did Thor. You're not completely absolved of sin either. And you can call me whatever you want. You know, pushy, asshole, jerk, impulsive, idiot, emotional, egotistical. But I am not a harasser. I did not harass Sam. He continues. And did you notice that Nick asked me to collab on the video with DL? Deadlifting. He was in the original group too. Wasn't in the second one. He made that decision to ask of his own accord. Lucas is a grown-ass man. If collab projects are a thing he wants to do, he can do the same. I'm going to interject here. Lucas is not a confrontational person, so I decided to stand up for him. Whether you think that was a good decision or not, that's on you. But that was why I did that. And here's the thing. Nick was never a part of the 6 main hosts. Nick's role in the original chat was he basically did what he did in Thor's comment section on the video with Dadlifting. He said, listen, I can't keep up with this. This all sounds really interesting. Message me when you want me on the show. That's what he said. And that's what he did in the comment section of Dadlifting, or of BlackThor's collab with Dadlifting. Lucas was a member of the 6 hosts. I think he deserves to be in the loop. He says, I don't see you creating content with anyone to be shaming me for trimming down the group when the group was too big. So now you're okay with trimming down the group when the group was too big? What happened when I did that with Sammy, who said that she couldn't actually commit to the project? And yeah, you're right, you can do whatever you want, but I do think that Lucas should have at least been in the know. Lucas had no idea that any of this was going on. He says, creators I've followed and respected for years weren't in V2. Your assertions of malevolence is juvenile and petty, entirely devoid of understanding the dynamic. Oh, you mean like your assertion of my harassment of Sammy? Juvenile and petty, completely devoid of understanding the dynamic? And I said, you should be telling this to Lucas, not me. Because at the end of the day, Lucas felt disappointed, and he used the term like they weren't friends anymore. I'm going to say betrayed. Lucas didn't say that. That's my interpretation of it. Lucas felt disappointed and betrayed. And I'm not putting words in Lucas's mouth here. That's my interpretation of things. But what he said exactly was, I felt disappointed, and because he closed Anabolic Friends, it felt like we weren't friends anymore. So it doesn't even matter who's complaining or who's in the right, because whether or not either one of us is right, it doesn't deny the fact that Lucas felt this way, that you upset Lucas. And I think he at least deserves an apology. It doesn't even matter whether I'm complaining and you're in the right, or you're in the right or you're complaining and I'm in the right. It doesn't matter. What matters is that at the end of the day, something you did upset Lucas. And you don't seem to be acknowledging the fact that Lucas was upset by this. He says to me, and he replies in that, you're the one complaining to me, mate. It's, again, Lucas has said everything I've said. But before he says that, he asks me, have you ever once asked what criteria I considered in the new group that I created? My group? I invite who I want in my group. Period. All groups are secret on Instagram. Well, first of all, the secret was the fact that you were keeping it hidden from Lucas. That's why I said secret. But you notice the desire for control here? The big need for power? My group that I created. Me. I invite who I want in my group. Me, big guy. No one stands up to the big guy. At least that's my interpretation of that. You call me egotistical? And that was one hell of a Freudian slip. Did you catch it? I invite who I want in my group. In the original group, Anabolic Friends, he didn't invite Lucas. I did. Is that an admission that he didn't even really want Lucas in the group to begin with? Now, full disclosure, he did say, if I missed anybody, invite them. But I'm curious, because Lucas doesn't really have an audience. Again, all my opinion. I have nothing to back any of that up on. But it's something that was a little bit interesting to me. But in response to him saying, you're the one complaining to me, I say, yeah, because Lucas isn't confrontational. Everything I've said, so is Lucas. And I just said, listen, at the end of the day, you accused me of harassment. I'm making the video to defend myself. He says, yet in spite of this, you made no new group that was more inclusive. Your Instagram has every power to do so. You're defending a ghost, mate. And then he sends up this image, showing me that the comment thread that we were discussing on has not been shown to the general public because he's being held for review. And I think this image is a perfect summary of the level of maturity of the man that I am dealing with. Because he could have said, there are many ways that he could have shown me that the comment, no one had seen what we had said. Right? He could have been like, listen, I know that you're upset. I understand that harassment is a very serious thing to accuse someone of. But look, don't worry. Because YouTube flagged your thing as harassment, no one actually saw this. There's no need to make this video. We can resolve this privately. But instead, he puts, oh, as if he's trying to own me or burn me. The level of maturity on this man. Like, really? And so, he says nobody has seen anything you or I has said. And so you all might be wondering, why am I making this video then? If nobody has seen any of this, it's because if he's willing to call me a harasser in a public comment section, he is definitely willing to say it in private behind my back. And even if he isn't, there is someone out there calling me a harasser. Maybe it's Sam. Maybe it is, because those are the only two people that know about this. I don't think any of the other people would go around saying that I harassed Sam. They're the only two people that really walked out not really liking me from that experience. But at the end of the day, there's someone going around saying, not dead yet, harassed SamDoesFitness. And I can't have that, because rumors like that spread like wildfire, and I am nipping this at the bud before anything happens, and before I get canceled or something. Before this affects my personal life. I'm showing the lies. And here's the thing, even if Thor isn't going around behind my back saying, not dead yet is a harasser, right? If someone comes up to him and says, hey, I heard that Not Dead Yet harassed SamDoesFitness. You were a part of that group. Is that true? He'll say yes. So I am putting this to bed right here, right now. And so in response to him saying, you could have made another chat, I replied, I never closed podcast only. And he said, but you didn't keep it active either, Eli. And I went, that's my job? Suddenly I'm supposed to... Neither did you, Thor. It's my job to keep the chat alive. Neither did anybody else. If people started talking in podcasts only, I would have definitely replied. But again, that was for the podcast, and it was clear the podcast fell through. I have made my own plans with other YouTubers, yeah. But it's not my job to keep the podcast or the chat alive. That was never the point of that chat. And yeah, I kept it open. If you thought that that could be the new anabolic friends, you could very well have continued to keep it active. And I would have replied. I would have continued to talk. But the sole burden of keeping the chat active doesn't fall on me. It falls on everybody in the chat. I could keep trying to keep it active, and then maybe you'll say I'm spamming the chat and then leave. Or say that the stuff I'm saying was enough to harass everybody in the chat. And then he says, you made your decision to choose to live in a victimhood fantasy. I'm the one who did that? I'm the one living in a victimhood fantasy? I'm not the one going around accusing innocent people of harassment. He said it was a week later that he made the new group. And in response to saying that I created a victimhood fantasy for myself, I simply said, then if I did, everyone will know when the video drops, and you can say I told you so. He replies, that's not in my nature, I'm not so petty. Keep telling yourself that. He says, just be prepared for a post full of screenshots if you lie or misrepresent anything. I have surgery tomorrow and won't be capable of bothering with voicing a response to you. And I simply reply, I wouldn't expect anything less. That, to me, strikes me as a man who didn't think I was actually making the video, because he, in the comment section, he was like, oh, go for it, man. And then when he saw that I was serious, he slides into my DMs saying, oh shit, he's going to put on display everything. I better try and stop him. And he starts with, well, I don't know how you can, how you think that you're going to deny anything I say. And I'm just going to be like, yeah, by showing what happened, by telling the truth, putting it all on display, letting for other people decide. Well, you're inconsistent. You're inconsistent. Well, why didn't you do this, or you did that? You have inconsistencies. And I'm just sitting there going, yeah, well, if I have inconsistencies, they'll be put on display when I make the video, because I'm going to be as objective as I can. And then he goes, well, look, nobody even saw anything we said. There's no need to make the video. You still accuse me of harassment, which is something very serious, and I'm going to make sure that this gets put on display. And then he ends it with, well, if you lie, I'm going to make a long post about it. And I said, yeah, that's fine. Go ahead. Because I don't plan to lie. I plan to show everything. And that is where our story ends. I just have a few closing remarks now, and that'll be the video. So now that we're wrapping up this video, I would like to have a few closing statements to my fellow creators, my audience, as well as Thor himself. First, my fellow creators, to anyone who supported me and reached out and said, "Don't worry, man, we got your back," I appreciate it more than you could possibly ever know. I've been in situations before where people have spread some pretty nasty rumors about me that were completely false, and people who knew the truth and should have had my back hopped up on the rumor train because it was lucrative for them to push me down. So to anybody, and I'm not going to say who they are, if they want to come out and publicly support me or come out and publicly denounce me, that is entirely their choice. But you know who you are. To everyone who supported me, thank you. From the bottom of my heart. It means more to me than you could possibly ever understand. To my audience now. I know some of you may be disappointed in me. Thank you for watching to the end if you are. But I'm not gonna... I refuse to sacrifice who I am for views and subs. I refuse to sacrifice what I believe for views and subs. And I refuse most of all to sacrifice my friends for views and subs. I am prepared to lose a lot of subscribers for this video. To people who actually sit through the whole thing. Or to, people who see that I disagreed with them politically and then just decided to unsubscribe. And to those of you who still support me, or to those of you who disagree with me, whether it's my worldview or how I acted, and yet are still here and are willing to have a discussion with me, thank you as well. If you want to drop some support, or if you disagree and want to have a discussion, either leave it in the comment section below, or you can DM me on Instagram at @onenotdeadyet1, and I'd love to have a conversation with you. I'd love to discuss, like I said, as long as it's respectful. I believe that a 5-minute conversation with someone that disagrees with me is worth way more than a 2-hour conversation with someone who agrees. So if you don't hate me, but we don't exactly see eye to eye, or you see things differently than I do, feel free to talk to me about it. I'd love to have a conversation with you. To those of you that hate me, probably haven't stuck till the end of the video. But to those of you that did, if you really want to hurt me, the unsubscribe button is right there. Don't dislike, don't comment, because that can help with pushing me into the algorithm, apparently. Just unsubscribe. If you really want to hurt me, unsubscribe. I notice everyone who subscribes and everyone who unsubscribes. And I'm prepared to lose subscribers for this. Because I am putting me out there, bare naked. This is me. And this is Thor. You are all judge, jury, and executioner. Judge us both. Now, do not, and this is incredibly important, do not harass Thor. I do not condone that. I do not endorse that. Do not. At all. Now to Thor himself. I have very little respect for you. If any at all. I think that harasser is not an accusation that should be thrown around lightly, and I think the fact that you are so willing to use it against me, who I genuinely believe, because maybe there are people in the comment section that have a different viewpoint than me on that, but I think most people would say that I did not harass Sam. And I think your willingness to throw it around so willy-nilly has lost you my respect. And you probably don't care. But I want to come back to what I said on that podcast day. Because just because you can lift heavy doesn't mean you're strong. Thor, you are mentally, emotionally, intellectually, and philosophically weak. All it took was a civil disagreement on worldview for you to attempt to ruin me. And to anyone who is subscribed to us both, I'm not telling you to unsubscribe to Thor. I actually am still subscribed to Thor, although I will probably be unsubscribing. I think he's an incredibly creative guy. His anabolic toffee is literally a work of genius. But I just can't bring myself to remain subscribed to someone who would so readily and so falsely accuse me of harassment. Despite all of this, Thor, I wish you an incredibly good surgery. I hope that there are absolutely zero complications, and I wish you nothing but the speediest of speedy recoveries. Because even though I do not like you for what you have accused me of, and I do not respect you, I would not wish harm upon you. I just don't. I tried to find some middle ground between us, and it's clear that that will most likely never happen. However, if you are genuinely willing to apologize for the lies that you have told me, and you are willing to publicly apologize, maybe we can reconcile. Because I don't like to hold grudges. One last thing, Thor. I eagerly await your post to see what you are going to say about what I lied about or what I misrepresented, because I do not believe I did. I have shown everything. And now it is up to the court of public opinion to decide who's in the right, who's in the wrong, or if we're both in the right kind of and in the wrong kind of, and who's going to get executed. Hopefully none of us. I just want to make sure that, because again, I don't even really wish people to unsubscribe or ruin his channel or anything. I'm just making this video because I want to put these rumors to bed. So yeah, I eagerly await your post, and I wish you the best of recoveries. But until that post comes out, I'm not dead yet. And if you aren't either, there's always a tomorrow waiting for you.